Welcome back to our Faith Family podcast. We are very glad to have Pastor Sue Lingerfelt with us. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Glad to have you with us. And we're going to talk about, I'm asking some questions about marriage.
Oh, fun.
Yes, because you have been married 49 years. So at the time of this recording, almost to 50.
Yes.
Yes. And let's just do a little background on you and Pastor. So y'all were married in what year?
1976.
1976.
Yes,
and
the bicentennial year.
Oh, that's right. And now we're about to have our big 250 year. Yes. So y'all met in high school.
We did. We met. We were 14.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And, kids.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know how boys are. They want to be noticed.
Yes.
And so we were sitting in biology lab, and a certain young man thought it would be very funny to throw a rubber snake over my shoulder in class. And the biology teacher was one of these guys. He was very cool. He was very relaxed. And so when the snake flipped over my shoulder and I, went, woo, and kind of got out of my chair, he laughed harder than the kids. He just thought that was funny. And that's when I noticed my future husband, which I didn't know. I did not know that would be him, but he got my attention.
What a great pickup line, right?
Oh, yes.
How funny.
Yeah.
That's great. And y'all, so you knew each other in high school, but you didn't really date until
our
right?
senior year.
Okay.
Yeah, our senior year we did.
And then he went to Miami of Ohio.
Yes.
And
and
you were there as well.
I did too.
Yes.
Yeah, he was actually, I think his dad wanted him to go to the University of Cincinnati.
Okay.
And I just, I preferred the smaller school. Mm-hmm. Miami was in its own little town, Oxford, Ohio.
Right.
Red brick buildings, tree-lined walkways. Mm-hmm. And you see downtown Cincinnati, even back then, we used to call it the jungle. So it was, for me, a little too scary to go to envision myself driving down there every day.
Right.
And going to school there. So, and then too, my mom and I shared a car. My dad was very conservative. So we shared a car. So I thought, now how's this going to work?
Right.
And so I told him I was going to go to Miami my freshman year. And he may had a decision to make if he was going to keep an eye on me.
Right.
And so that's what he decided to do. He switched over to Miami. And so we were there together.
Now, you grew up you have a brother and a sister.
I do.
And he is an only child.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm sure that brought some fun.
Well, it was so it was different. And then, my family, lots of extended family, cousins, and from a Germanic background. So, everybody's kind of, when they get together, they're loud. And fun and, big family dinners for holidays and things and birthdays. And, if for him, his extended family was all in Tennessee or Michigan. So whenever they, did anything, his family was just the three of them. It was quiet. And so coming around my family for holiday stuff and that, it was very different.
Yeah, I bet. It was a wake-up
kind
call.
of maybe overwhelming.
Yeah, I bet, yes.
Yes, but I think, I think he liked it because of how nice, by and large, my whole family was, especially my grandparents and that, yeah.
So who influenced you the most in your marriage? Who did you look up to the most around you that really taught you how to have a strong marriage?
I think my grandparents.
Okay.
And then, I think as a child and growing up, because as far as a married couple was concerned, I pretty much grew up a lot in their home as well. Because when I was born, my mom still went back to work full time. So actually, as an infant, I spent a lot of time at their house. And sometimes in the winter, I'd be there for a whole week without my mother coming to get me because of the snow. So my grandparents played a big part in my life as far as what a Christian home should be like, a married couple. I mean, it was very, there was a lot of love there, and then a lot of peace there. When I was born, my aunt was still at home because she's only 7 years older than I am. So I was born, she was 7, so I was kind of like her baby sister. And so she was there, and my 2 uncles were already grown and in the military. And so, it was just kind of us girls there with my grandmother, and she babied us and took care of us. And my mom was a lot like my grandmother, very loving, very giving, very kind. So I really learned how to, I think, be a wife, be a mom from those women.
Right.
And so I really owe it to them that whatever blessings and in marriage I've had in parenting, I learned from them.
Well, I've got to say, from my perspective, being around, for all these years, one of the best qualities I see in your marriage with Pastor is your support for Pastor and your level of respect for Pastor, which I'm sure is not always the easiest thing, but that's such an important thing.
It is.
And it's missing, I think, a lot in modern marriages is this.
It is.
This respect for each other and this building each other up.
Yeah. Yeah. And when in our marriage, we were privileged just to hear some great teams, husbands and wives, speak on marriage. We got to hear Tim and Beverly LaHaye in person. We got to hear James Dobson several times, and his wife didn't speak with him, but there was always his stories about him and his wife, and and some other pastors talk about marriage, and those were in those early years of our marriage and in the ministry, and then learning how to, not just hearing what they said, but then incorporating those principles into our behavior in our own marriage with each other. And that's what's so important, I think. And back then, Dr. Dobson had his radio program every day on parenting or marriage. And so that was one of my things, because it was like right around the 5 o'clock or get ready for dinner hour. So I was able to listen every day and learn from that. And then we read his books and other people's books on marriage. And so, we were learning because we were young, we were in the ministry, and we wanted to help people.
Right.
So the first people you ought to really want to help is yourselves, because you're young. We didn't have life figured out, and we were just starting to, step out in life together as newly marrieds and pre-children. And so you have to learn from your elders. You have to learn from those who have gone before you, and the people that it's obvious they have something to emulate.
Right. That's important, is to work on your marriage.
Yes.
And to go after knowledge and go after wisdom.
Yes.
Because you don't know it. When you get married, you figure out, I don't know everything.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, to me, as far as, being a wife, and we first got married and moved to Texas. So that was a transition. Because I missed, especially the female members of my family. I missed my grandmother, my mom, my sister, and you didn't see family. It was just the 2 of us. So it was a little lonely for me. Plus, my husband was going to school and working nights and weekends. So that left, me to go to school and work days. And so you would think I was busy enough, but I was still lonely when he wasn't there at night. He was working. And, so you have a transition to make. And then to focus on, well, we're a couple, we're married. So, no point, crying over missing mama. So, I put my energies into, being a wife and, making sure, with the budget we had, he had a good dinner every day. And, doing the laundry and keeping a little bit of household in order that we had, which in seminary duplex was basically a living room, a tiny kitchen, and a bedroom, and a tiny bathroom. So we, one thing Pastor says, and I think is really true, that whatever stage of married life we were at, we enjoyed each one of them. I mean, we were poor. We didn't have any money like to go out to eat or anything. Our big treat was the $5 2-for-1 Parton's Pizza special on Saturdays. And when we could splurge and do that, that was a big deal. Like we really needed 2 large pepperoni pizzas. But we basically made them last all weekend. And, we were young, so we do it. But, that was the treat. And so, but to enjoy each season of life that you're in is a really big deal. I've talked to, over the years, young wives, and sometimes they're very irritated, and they complain how their husband has to be gone so much, working and then maybe going to school at night because he's trying to finish a degree. But, I always tell them, well, that investment of his time is so that you can have more later and then have more time together later. So you need to be, not critical of that and not complaining when he gets home, but you need to show your gratitude that he's, really doing double duty by having, a great dinner or something he likes to eat ready, and and be happy to see him then when when he can come home, and not complaining.
Well, I like to ask sometimes whenever we do weddings, like a year later, I like to ask them, so what has surprised you about, what has surprised you about marriage? So I don't know if you remember, was there a few things that after you got married, you were like, okay, this is a little different than I expected, and how did you handle some of that?
Yeah, we had to learn how to handle each other's personalities. Because when you're dating, you're together for dates, you're together for several hours, doing this, doing that, going here, going there, and, you're around each other a lot, but it's not the same as being married and living together and 24/7. And then realizing, this person, that I like so much, I love so much, has a very strong, unique personality, and the way, you each like to do things, and then, what irritates you, and the way he does the toothpaste tube is, the right way, but the way I grab it and do it, now I've messed it up. Stuff, silly little inconsequential stuff like that. But when you're newly married, it's like all this little stuff suddenly becomes apparent, and you think, oh my goodness, we're really 2 different people. And we think different on a lot of things. But see, the thing that was so important for us was, we thought the same on what was most important in life. And that was our faith in Jesus Christ and the Word of God and living for God. And so that was our guide, that was our anchor. And that always brought us back, if I can say it this way, it brought us to heel when, either one of us wanted to maybe be out of sorts a little bit with each other. Over nothing, over silly, childish, that seminary duplex, the old fridge was probably like from the 1950s. And it had one of those little freezers on top. You open the door and it would get caked with ice around it. And it had like one little aluminum ice tray that you had to fill with water. And then you had to bang it on the sink and get the ice cubes out. And that was just a pain for me. And I'm not that big a deal. My drink can just be whatever. I don't need ice in it. So a lot of times, I guess apparently this was one of my newly married faults. I would not refill the ice tray. I would just shove it back in the freezer empty, which apparently was horrifying to my young husband. And that was I think that was one of the first big discussions we had was, why don't you refill the ice tray? Why don't you make ice and put it in the little bowl we have in the freezer, you know? And I'm like, yeah, I know, I just didn't think about it, you know?
Right.
You know, and that's what you kind of learn in those first days, weeks, months, years of marriage, is it's not about just doing what's important to me, but I have to learn to do what's important for my husband. Because he's a different person, and he, you know, what's important to me is not all that important to him.
Right.
And so, you know, I had things that were very important to me, the way I did them or the way they were done, and other things were very important to him.
Right.
And so you kind of learn that relationship is one of give and take. And you learn that, you know, well, if this is important to my spouse, then I should, you know, learn how to, you know, make this happen for him or for her.
I need to work on this.
Yes, I need to work on this.
Yes.
So I had to work on the whole ice thing.
That's so funny.
Just do it like, you know, a matter of due course. You know, it's
Right.
empty, you fill it, you make ice, you put it in the little bowl, and then you fill it again so there's backup.
Right.
I learned this about him. He was a great believer in backup. You don't run out of anything. And that was part of, I think, one of the major differences in his growing up, because he was an only child.
Right.
And mine, you know, the oldest of three, you know, at our house, my mom's budget, I'm sure due to the frugality of my father, was very much geared to, by the time you hit dinner Friday evening, you've run out of everything. We were down to our last groceries. We were down to the last toilet paper. We were down to anything, you know, you bought. You know, she'd buy just enough for the week. And, you know, by Friday night dinner, we ate what was there. And then because my mom didn't learn to drive till I was 16, we all loaded up in the car with my dad and all went to the grocery store.
You all went to the grocery store. I bet that was fun.
I imagine it was not fun for my mother.
I bet it wasn't.
It was fun for us. Because we each, you know, got to pick one thing to eat.
Sure.
That we wanted to eat that week,
Yeah.
which was kind of a splurge.
Yes.
And my husband, being an only child, well, you know, his mother, you know, shopped, and, you know, that was the first thing I learned, you know, once visiting his house, dating. I went upstairs and just happened to open the bathroom cabinet. And it was like a revelation. I'd never seen so many rolls of toilet paper.
Surplus,
you know,
huh?
surplus, hairspray, and all these supplies. And I thought, it's like a store. But that's how he grew up. And so this whole thing of coming down to the last of anything, the last bit of anything, was horrifying to him. How could you run out of? And I said, well, we didn't run out. I have to go to the store.
Right. I'm going to the store. Right. That's so funny.
So I had to learn that he liked backup on, you know, the everyday essentials of life.
Yes.
And that was, it sounds so silly, but that's really when you first get married. You're falling out on little things is the big things.
Right.
You know, it becomes the big things, you know, what you argue about.
Right. Because it seems like a lot of, especially young couples, they have this expectation of the way it's supposed to, like it's going to be like
Like
this.
the
or it's gonna be
honeymoon,
like,
or where
yes.
you're like at a nice hotel,
Right.
or on a cruise, or a place where, you know, the meals are provided and you
Right.
have all this stuff at your fingertips. You don't have to think about, you know, getting anything for yourself.
Yeah, and so when the expectations don't match up, they get frustrated and they start complaining,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
a bad seed to
Well,
sow.
and complaining, you know, me complaining, which I think women typically, we don't realize, you know, we probably do more complaining than requesting. And, you know, complaining about a thing doesn't solve a thing,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And men are fixers, by and large. They want to fix the problem. And sometimes women just want to vent about a problem. And so you have to learn that complaining, venting, you know, doesn't really fix the problem.
Right.
You know, but just, you know, stating, you know what, I bet there's a way we could do this better. How could we do this better? How could I do this better?
So without giving your secrets away, Pastor Sue, when you have a situation where it's really kind of irking you,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that? What's the best way you found to deal with that in marriage?
Yes. And so, you know, typically if something's really irking me, that's where, you know, I wake up in the middle of the night, I can't sleep. It's like it's big on my mind.
Right.
And so I realize, okay, and so I usually make it a point of prayer first, usually go to the Word, try and find my answer or direction somewhere in the Word of God. And God has directed me a lot over the years, and before I talk with my husband about something, to prepare my heart and my mind to make sure I'm going to be speaking in line with the Word.
That's important.
And so I'll usually end prayer and then going to the Word, be directed by certain passages to read. And 1 Peter chapter 3, Ephesians chapter 5, Ephesians 4, Colossians chapter 3, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and other passages. Sometimes the Psalms, calm me down. Yeah. And I'll read the Psalms a while to get to a place of peace. Mm-hmm. And, so I'm not all agitated and worked up.
Right.
And, these men, by and large, don't really appreciate a wife coming out of the other room with her hair on fire. Right. And, being all worked up about, and they're like totally like, what in the world is going on? Right. They have no clue. Right. Typically, right. They don't know why you're all worked up.
Get hit broadside.
Yes,
they
have no idea. Uh-huh. So, and I learned this early in my marriage when, whether it was a budgetary thing, I felt like we needed to allocate more resources toward like clothes or whatever it is. That I should pray about a thing first. Right. And 9 times out of 10, honestly, God would change my heart first. Because, my husband, because of how he led our home and our marriage, he had the responsibility to make sure we could pay the rent, we could pay the car payment, we could pay for the insurance, and we could pay everything necessary every month. And then eat groceries and then see what was left over. Right. I wanted to put other things in the budget, but he explained to me, especially when you're newly married, right. In those first few years of marriage, right. There's really not room for that. It's almost kind of like, let's believe God and see if there's anything extra left over, right. This month or next month. Mm-hmm. Which is, it's just hard. It's a little hard.
It's not fun.
It's not fun. It's not the way I grew up, Mm-hmm. Even though my dad was very frugal, he loved to save money. And, but if I needed something or wanted a new outfit or clothes or shoes, I would just say so. And usually within a pretty short period of time, my mom would take me shopping and we'd get that. Right. So, when you're on your own and you're newly married, and now it's just up to the two of you to make it all work, and so that has its own challenges. Yes. And not to be the kind of wife that just unloads on her husband. He's finally home, and I'm gonna just tell him, this isn't working, or that's broken, or I need this, or we've got to get that, and I can't deal with this anymore like this.
Well, you've been thinking about it all day, probably.
Right.
Working it up in your head.
Right.
And working it up.
And you get all, and then he comes to...
He's been at work.
He's innocent.
Yes. And
he's ignorant of the facts.
Right.
And he walks in the door, and it's like this barrage is hitting him. Right. And he's like, what in the world? He just wants to come home, peaceful, smiling wife, eat dinner, So I learned to get my ducks in a row first and pray about a thing first. And 9 times out of 10, like I said, God would change my heart, and I'd learn to give things to God and wait on the Lord to provide certain things, the extras, or, to speak to his heart about a situation. Mm-hmm. And it was uncanny, and the first few times it happened, it was almost a little scary to realize that God really hears us when we pray. Yeah. Because I would have prayed about a thing and given it to God and felt like God, kind of smote my heart and convicted me of my attitude. And then it was like within just barely days, out of the blue, the words would come out of my husband's mouth exactly wanting to do or purchase or the thing that I had prayed to God about, that I had been so worked up over. And it was almost a little scary to think that, God, yes,
Exactly.
He does know our hearts.
Yeah.
And He sees and hears everything. And He does work on our behalf if we make our ways pleasing to Him.
Right.
The Word says.
Yeah, and it's just simple concepts, right?
Yes.
You love each other, so
Yeah.
you're not enemies.
No, we're not enemies.
You're for each other.
We're for each other.
So it's not
Yes.
about, is it going to work out? Just the question is, how is it going to work out?
Right. So working together, the team approach. So we're a team, his duties and responsibilities are often and very much different than mine. Mine are different than his, but we're a team. We work together toward the goals we want to accomplish. And whether it was, just being happily married together and having, love and peace in our home, or then later having children and maintaining love and peace in our home.
Right, because that changes everything.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And so just learning how to, every new phase of life and every new challenge that came along, to approach it like a team and solve it like a team. And, basically, he did everything he did to provide and protect, and he expected me to do everything else that he wasn't suited to do or wanted to do, and that was fine with me.
Right.
And we kind of, when we first got married, had a division of labor, and when we owned our first home, it really became apparent, because living in the duplex, there were no yard duties or outside duties. But when we moved into our first home, it was kind of like, oh, now there's more upkeep, maintenance. So we agreed that, he'd take care of the outside, lawn, everything. Because after I used the lawnmower one time, he made me promise the rest of our married lives I would never, ever turn on a lawnmower again.
Oh, man, I wish we had video of Pastor
Apparently,
Sue
and when he
using a
drove,
lawnmower.
if you can imagine the look on his face, he drove home, and when he got to the driveway, he wondered why there was a cut path from the driveway around the house to the backyard. Because I decided to do the backyard first because it was bigger. And I got partway through and realized, man, this is a lot of work, and I stink at this. And so I rolled it back and just parked it in the garage. Thought maybe I'll finish it tomorrow. But he was horrified.
So you just thought to yourself, the yard needs to be mowed,
I
so
did.
I'll help out and I'll mow the yard.
I did, and part of it was I had the bright idea to have a garden for the first time in my life, and there was so much grass and weeds encroaching in the garden. I thought, man, that, and then I didn't realize. See, I was a newbie. If you wait till it rains, you can pull all that out easy.
Yeah.
But had been hot and dry, and I was trying to pull out all that, and it was impossible. So I thought, I'm just going to cut all that down with the lawnmower. And when he came home, he was just absolutely horrified.
Oh, man, if we only had a picture
If
or
we had a
video of
picture
Pastor
of
Sue
that.
pushing a lawnmower.
And then, so he came home, but I was happily making his dinner. So I fed him, and then he went out to fix the yard. So.
How funny.
But we had this division of labor. I took care of the inside of the house. He took care of the outside. And that seemed to kind of calm the storm. And we kind of navigated it that way for many years.
That's great. That's great. So throughout all these years, you guys have done some hard things.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Financial pressure, big project at the church.
Yeah.
Your personal lives.
Yeah.
So what are some things you could suggest for couples if there's a lot of pressure in the room, a lot of pressure on the couple? What are some things that you've learned to help through those? Because they're not permanent; they're temporary times.
No, it's temporary.
But to get through those things together.
Well, the big thing for us was always to be in agreement. So any time we were going to make a decision on doing a big thing. And when we first got married, we agreed that we would never spend more than $100 without each other's knowledge and permission, because that's just where our budget was. Mm-hmm. We could throw a big wrench into our budget if one of us, just bought something for $200 or $300 and then we couldn't pay the rent
Right.
that month.
That's a problem.
So that for many of the early years, it was $100. So if I wanted to buy something, even when we'd been married 3 or 4 or 5 years, you know, and I'd say, well, I saw this, it's on sale, I'd like to buy it. Can I buy it this week or tomorrow? And he'd look in our checkbook and he'd say yes or no. And the same with him. I mean, we just didn't go, you know, buy stuff and then surprise each other. You know, because our budget couldn't handle any surprises for quite some years.
Right.
And then doing the big things in life, when we made the decision, we were young, married. He was finishing up his degree at the seminary, and we were working in a church. We had started a Christian school for them, and a missionary came and spoke about the need in East Africa at the Bible college there. So extended the opportunity for us to go spend a year so that the missionary that was there could take their furlough year, leave in America. And so I had just had Austin. I mean, I think Austin was about 2 months old when that missionary came. My first baby. I'm doing all this without my mom or my grandma nearby.
Right, all your family around.
And he's telling me that this missionary extended the invitation for us to move to Kenya for a year.
What was your initial reaction?
And I was shocked. I totally had not expected anything like that. And the funny thing was, you know, there were these pangs of guilt because when we were in college and at Bible college, you know, I really felt a call to missions and felt like I might end up on the mission field. And that was before we married. And so, you know, lots of emotions, lots of feelings. But he was smart. You got to hand it to Dr. Gene. He's a very smart man and young wife. And I'm sure saw the look on my face. And he said, well, you just pray about it. You just pray about it, because we had decided, you know, we were going to do everything in agreement as a team, everything we did, anything important. And so, you know, he'd go to work every day that week, and he'd come home and he'd say, did you pray about it? So for several days, I refused to pray.
Oh, did you?
I did not pray at all.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of tells you about our hearts can be stubborn.
Right.
You know, because sometimes we're afraid of what God's going to ask us to do, because maybe we're going to perceive it to be more than what we want to do, or harder than what we want to do. And so for several days that week, I refused to pray. And I didn't tell him that. I just said, I haven't heard anything.
Well, I heard things I haven't asked yet.
I just told him I hadn't heard. And so I don't know if it was the 4th day or the 5th day, but it was towards the end of the week, and from that previous Sunday, and somewhere in that night I was up with Austin or in the wee hours of the morning, and I just, you know, opened my heart to God. So, and then it's so funny because when it's the Lord and it's good, He's not going to do anything to bring us harm, but He wants to do something good in our lives that's going to just be something that is just going to change our lives for the better forever.
Right.
He just flooded my heart with peace. And that's so hard to resist.
Right.
Because it's like when you first came to Christ and gave your heart to the Lord, and you felt this love in your heart that you'd never experienced before, because it wasn't like natural human love, but it was God's love, this unconditional love. And so He flooded my heart with so much peace. All I could do was sit there and cry, you know, but it was like a good crying. It wasn't like angry crying or upset crying. It was like a good crying, because it was like a yielding to Him. And peace. And you know, when you have the peace of God on a thing, all the questions that you have just kind of they're not all answered right away, but you realize it's going to be okay. It's going to all fall into place at the right time, in the right way when it needs to. And so when he came home that day, he said, "Did you pray?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I have peace." He says, "Okay, we're going." I think he was already half packed.
He probably had everything already in order.
He had his checklist already on that. So I just knew that somehow God had it all taken care of, and we'd get through it, and it would be good, and it was. And we called that year in Kenya our boot camp, for pastoring, for learning how to really pastor. And so after that year, when we came back to Pioneer Church, that was another time to pray, to be in agreement. Different people thought we should look at different cities to pioneer a church in. And so we did our due diligence, and we prayed, but we didn't have peace until, he heard God speak to his heart about Arlington, Texas. And, we prayed, and we just both had peace.
So it's that team effort.
It's that team effort. Because sometimes in the natural, and this is really important for married couples, doesn't matter what you're praying about, moving to a different city, buying a new house, buying a new car, having another child, is that you pray and you both have the peace of God about it. You're both in agreement. You're going to do it together. See, and this is what's so important, because if we make this decision together, and somehow it turns out very wrong, or we get a black eye doing it, or it costs us, dearly financially, or whatever the situation may be, or it ends up somehow we thought it was a good decision and we thought it was the right thing to do, but the car was a lemon and it was obviously not the right thing to do. We don't blame each other. And that's the big thing. There's no pointing of the finger. Well, why did you get us in this mess? Why did you make this decision? Why did you move us here? And I can't stand it. And all of that. So any major decision of life, major expenditure, major thing we decide to do, we decided early on we were going to be in agreement or not do it.
That's interesting, because he could have come home and said, "We're going to Africa."
He could have. He very well could have.
We're going, so get your mind right and get on board with it. But he allowed you to work with your heart.
Yes, to have some time to make sure it was God too. And I think he's that honest. Yes. And I don't know that people really appreciate that about our pastor. That he is that honest with himself and with God, and with everybody else, that, he wanted to do it. I'm sure in his heart had a green light, but he knew that he didn't want to drag this woman and this little tiny baby all the way across the world
and listen about it for a year.
Yeah, and it turn into a real hardship.
Right.
So so he's that honest, and he did want me to pray about it. And we had prayed earlier when we first got engaged. He said, I want to go. I don't feel like I'm ready, graduating from Central Bible College, to go into the ministry full time. He said, so I want to go to seminary, and there's this seminary in Fort Worth, Texas I want to go to. And so, he said, pray about it, because that's where we were going to start our married life, and because I had asked questions. Well, isn't there one in Ohio? Isn't there one? And there were Kentucky close by, and all that. He said, yes, there is. I've looked at those. But for several important reasons, he liked this seminary. It's very conservative in Fort Worth. And so that's where he wanted to go. He said, so pray about it. And I did. He allowed me that privilege to pray about it. He didn't just say, well, we're going to get married, we're going to move to Texas.
Right.
And then he didn't say, well, our son is 2 months old, and in 3 months we're going to move to Kenya.
Right.
So it's really important. So, and I know people make decisions all the time as far as getting a new job, and maybe it's in the same town, so it's no big deal. But I think husband and wives should be on the same page on every major decision, where their kids go to school, where they go to church as a family. And it shouldn't be one person, making these decisions for everybody. It should be us being in agreement. Now, I know sometimes in marriages you have one spouse and they're just totally not interested. They don't, whatever you decide is fine with me.
Right.
And sometimes you have to deal with that that way.
Right.
Well, it's also interesting from what I hear you saying that the decision-making process, if the initial reaction from the spouse is not what you expected, it's not end of the world.
It's not end of the
It's
world.
not blow up.
No.
It's, well, let's just sit on this for a while. But then the Lord is an important part of that because
Yes.
He's the one that helps correct our hearts.
He does.
Right.
If we allow him to.
Right, if we have a soft heart.
If we have a soft heart toward the Lord, toward his word.
Right.
And we don't, take it upon ourselves to think, we know best and we're what I want to do is more important than what you think.
Right.
Or, even what you think God would think. So it's very important that we, it's the end of the last verse of Ephesians chapter 4. It says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Well, that's true in the body of Christ, but then that's true in our marriage and in our homes and family, that we submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And in that regard, then, we can operate together in the peace of God and maintain the love of God in our relationship, that we're not running roughshod over each other.
Right. Right.
Because sometimes a change in employment for one spouse will put more of a hardship on the family or the other spouse, whether it's more drive time, more time away from home, maybe it's more money, maybe it's less money, but that there are other perceived advantages. So, but it's really important that, any major decision that requires a change in our budget or lifestyle or, time together, that we're in agreement. When our daughter Christina married Derek, because he was a police officer at the time and a canine officer, and because when they first got married, he had to work nights. He had the night shift. So that was a lot. That was a big change for our daughter.
That's not easy.
And that's not easy, even for veterans.
Yeah.
And so, she had to navigate that and learn how to be a happy wife, a newly married wife.
Right.
And where she, worked during the day and he worked at night. And so they, except for when he wasn't working, they weren't spending much time together. And so that was something she had to learn how to navigate and be the happy wife and make it enjoyable for when they were together, not complaining and not calling him up when he was working. What are you doing? And I miss you so much. I think I'm going to start crying. I was proud of her. And I would call her some and I say, how are you doing? And what are you going to do tonight? And everything. And so she did great. I was proud of her because I know it wasn't easy for her at all.
Right.
Because and it wasn't easy for him either. He had a new wife and he had to work all night.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Plus doing a dangerous job.
And doing a dangerous job. And that was the big thing. He told her, he said it's really important because of what I do and how focused I have to be. I can't be worried about you.
No.
And I can't, he said, so when I go to work, we have to, the parting has to be happy. We tell each other we love each other and we mean it. And, there's no issue when I go off to work because to be 100% focused and not to miss a beat, that could cost, a life or some danger, So he explained that to her early on and she got it.
Right.
So, most of us don't have those kinds of jobs.
No.
So sometimes, we're in a tizzy about something or we say something to each other before we go to work.
Right.
And, it's not life or death or, if we're not totally focused.
Right.
But, it's really a good principle for all of us to follow.
Yes.
That, we should send each other off to work happy or for the day to where we're not, bummed out and, kind of, half our mind's not there.
Or sending a bombshell text message.
Yeah.
With our society today,
Yes,
it's like in the middle of the day, just boop.
Yes,
pop it on there.
that's not, yeah, at least in the olden days that I grew up in and I was young married in, you had to call somebody on the phone
Right.
to tell them something.
Right.
Or you had to go see them. You know,
Right.
there wasn't texting and even emailing back then.
Right.
And so, you know, we had, I'm going to say it, and y'all, young folks aren't going to understand this, but I think we had a lot more peace.
Sure.
You know, just
Sure.
because there wasn't this barrage always of information from everyone all the
Right.
time.
Right.
So,
Well, you know, with text messaging is so instant.
yes,
You can get in trouble
yes,
because you're like you were talking about earlier about, okay, you're sitting around all day thinking about
yes,
whatever it is. And so when
Yes.
your husband comes home, you're like hair on fire.
yes,
But what today it seems like if they have an instant thought, boop, it goes out, which is not good because then
Right.
you're not thinking about it, you're not being
right.
calm about it, and then you're ruining the other spouse's day. No matter you don't know what they're going through at that
No,
moment.
what they're having to deal with, and you know
Right.
how focused they have to be, and you know
Right.
on top of things.
Right.
And yeah, it's just totally unfair. Well, you know what it is? It's selfish, and we
Yes.
can all be selfish. We're human
Yes.
beings, you know, but to do what's best for the other person.
Yeah. I'm upset about this right now.
Right now,
So I need you
to be
upset about
too.
this.
So
Yes.
yeah, that's very selfish,
Right.
and especially if they're having to go to work or they're having to deal with things, or she's having to deal with a house full of kids,
Right.
and and not fight back tears.
Right.
So it's very important. This to me, this whole thing of going to God first,
Yeah.
praying about things first. I mean, and then being in the ministry from the time we were newly married, working in another church, and then Africa, and then pioneering our church, being in the ministry and kind of growing up in the ministry through the decades. And, things upset us. Somebody says something to us. You think, was that deliberate? Did they want to insult me or hurt my
Right,
feelings?
right.
Or, are they trying to do something nefarious?
Right.
Or whatever it could be. But, if I'm upset about something, I learned that he's handling stuff that I couldn't handle or wouldn't want to handle. There's no point me upsetting him unnecessarily, or trying to shove my burden onto him, because that's really what we do when we're. But to take things to God first,
Yeah.
and like I said, 9 times out of 10, it would be handled between me and the Lord,
Right.
and I wouldn't have to say boo to anybody.
Right.
Which is always best, and there's a
Yes.
lot of proverbs about that.
Oh, yes.
And and not being the kind of person that takes up an offense,
Right.
at every little thing,
Right.
and letting a lot of things just that saying just kind of wash over us like water off a duck's back.
Right.
And just people a lot of times they say things you don't even know why they said what they said. Was it a backhanded compliment, or were they really trying to insult you
Right.
or hurt your feelings? You don't know, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because none of that, pays the bills or puts the kids to bed or, makes your life work.
And it's not beneficial for the family.
No, it's not beneficial for the family. So I learned, to be focused on the only thing that matters is what I have to do and what my family has to do and what my husband and I have to do and what we're having to do at work. Everything else is just like noise, a smoke screen.
Right.
It doesn't really have any importance.
Right.
So,
So I got one more question for you.
yeah.
That, all these young couples or couples in the middle of all these pressure situations.
Yeah.
You and Pastor Elm has been married for 50 years. What do you enjoy so much about your marriage now that you're like, I'm so glad, that we stuck it together? What can you tell some of these younger couples that they have coming down the line?
If you put God first, and that means putting His Word first in your life, going to His Word to solve your problems and encourage your heart and help you make life work, and then you put each other first. If I put him first and he puts me first, then we're both doing something good for each other every day. And Pastor actually used to say this. He'd say to the husbands, do one nice thing for your wife every day or every week. Even if it's every week, that's a big deal. Like something extra, something, change the light bulbs or, pick up this at the store, whatever it is. Do something, say something nice to each other every day. And be a blessing to each other, because even in the midst of the hard years where you're working more hours, going to school too, or raising all the children, getting them through school and all the stages of life, when you're doing all that and you're so busy, but to remember that you love each other and to say something along those lines every day. Tell each other you love them. You love your spouse every day. Give them a hug every day, even when it's been like a really hard day and you don't feel like hugging anybody.
Right.
You want to just go
Right.
soak in the bathtub or hide in the shower.
Right.
But tell them you love them every day, and tell them why you appreciate your spouse. Just see something they did, or just the way they're helping with the kids, helping get them ready for bed, or whatever it is, or, picking them up from the sports game, or whatever it is, helping them with homework. Appreciate the little things along the way. Because then, yes, even when you're in the midst of it and you think, oh, these days are so long, suddenly one day you wake up and you're in that stage where it's just the two of you. And you think, oh, it's just us. It's so quiet here. Austin will come over to our house sometime and goes, man, it's quiet over here.
Well, yeah.
I'm sure.
Way different.
I'm sure
Way different
than
ways
his house
experiencing.
full.
Yes.
And I said, yes. I said, it is quiet over here. But,
Yes.
so we to enjoy each other's company along the way, and to be there for each other, and to, have each other's back. Part of my role is I always saw where I would do things to help my husband that obviously he would find a burden or a hardship to do, and that God would give me grace to do it, and that way I would be helping lighten his load. And then he did all the things for me that would just boggle my mind. I mean, we are way past the days where, paying all the bills each month is just writing a check in the checkbook and
Yes.
mailing it.
Yes.
I mean, now everything's computerized and on
Yes.
spreadsheets and auto this
Or
and auto
automatic,
that.
yeah.
My brain would just, I'd have to hire somebody to be my personal accountant and secretary.
Yeah.
So he takes care of the stuff that I just don't want to take care of. The
Right.
cars,
Right.
I rarely have to, and I don't want to put pressure on any of the guys out there, but I rarely get in a car that I have to gas up.
Right.
He keeps my cars gassed up. He makes sure the tires are good. And I rarely have to tell him. Every once in a while, because now everything's electronic, I say, oh, my car is saying this or that. And he's like, okay. And he just right away picks up the phone and calls so-and-so at the car dealership and says, her car's going to need this or that
Right.
service.
Right.
So, if you're there for each other all the years, all the days of the years in between, when you get to the golden years, I guess they call them, then you can actually just, enjoy being, married. My husband sometimes will turn and look at me on a Friday night, Saturday evening in the theater room, and goes, because he, usually it's a Western or it's whatever he just chills with, a detective show. And he'll just say, he says, I know I'm really boring, because and I said, yes, but I like it.
It's a good boring.
I said, I'm relaxing. Because, 7 grandkids, I really don't, want to get dressed up and go out to dinner.
Right.
That sounds boring of me. I
Right,
know. I mean,
right.
we do things for anniversaries and special occasions, but for us, it's usually lunch out. It's easier than dealing with nighttime stuff and crowds on Valentine's. So we have found our rhythm, I guess, together, and
and I have to really credit my grandmother and my mother, because I really learned from them. They were really exemplary women and godly women and loving women, and that, the role of the wife, the mother, the homemaker, is to make everybody else's life really work, and that the home is a sanctuary for the family, and it's a place of love, it's a place of peace, it's a place of nurturing and good food, and it's yes, the home is his castle,
Right.
and so that he has to find peace in the home.
Right.
And so I learned that early on in the first years of marriage. He doesn't want to come home and find, a woman there that's having, a fit about something.
Right.
So I learned if I'm going to, help a sister in the Lord or help someone, I go meet them somewhere. They don't come into my home, and they're not there when my husband comes home, still crying or complaining about her husband or whatever her situation is. So I learned that early on. I don't let other people bring their troubles into our home.
Right.
If I'm going to help somebody, I go help them where they're at.
Right.
And I don't bring it into my home.
house, yeah.
I don't bring it. Our home is our sanctuary,
Right.
and it needs to be a place of peace.
Right.
And it's the most important place on earth, and it should be heaven on earth. It shouldn't be hell on earth.
Yes, right.
So it should
Right.
be a place where, whether it's mom coming home or dad coming home or the wife or the husband coming home, you open the door, you step in, and it's the presence of God. It's the
Yes.
peace of God there.
Yes.
And men, if I know anything about men, they don't like to come home and be hit with a barrage, a tornado, a hurricane of, onslaught of complaints or, tears or issues. Learn how to have some decorum, some control, and wait. Sometimes I'd have to wait before I told my husband something. Sometimes it was more than a day or two, because I'd have to wait for the right time where I could tell I needed a little of his focus on something that he probably doesn't want to deal with, but just something we need to talk about.
Right.
So I pray about it, do dinner, get the kids in bed, and, but if it was obvious he had a hard day or he was tired or that, I thought, well, tonight's not the night. So wait till
Right.
the next day. But usually within a day or two, it wasn't like the world was going to end.
Right.
And
Right.
but to wait till we had a time to talk, and usually it was just something, take a couple minutes, but, and then he'd be like, very matter of fact, no big deal. This is what we'll do.
Yeah.
And okay.
And it's handled.
And it's handled.
Yeah.
So, but not, getting him, because inside I might feel like I'm exploding,
Right.
but to learn not to be that off-centered woman
Right.
that, is just going to have her hair on fire all the time.
Well, it's awesome to see the rewards you guys are getting in this time of your life for you and your marriage, because I know y'all worked hard at it and y'all stuck it out and as a team, and it's worth it.
Yes, it's worth it. It's worth it because it is your life. And, marriage is a covenant. It's been given to us by God. He says it's sacred. It's sacred to him. And so I think we've lost sight of that a lot in our generation
Sure.
right now.
Sure.
That marriage is not man's, it's God's. And it's a covenant he gave to us as husband and wife to cherish it, to call it sacred.
Right.
And it's our covenant with him as husband and wife. It belongs to him. And with that comes certain rules.
Yeah.
Rules of engagement.
Yes.
And so we honor it, we honor God, and in that, people are supposed to see in our marriages, in our homes, they're supposed to see a type of Christ in the church. And so that's the goal, that we live a life of love And we have his love and his peace, and it's in our lives, in our hearts, and in our homes. And that people will see that. And then that we model that for our children.
Right, absolutely.
Because they need a model, because this world is like groping for truth like never before. And it's always been there in front of them.
Right.
But they have to see it lived out.
Right.
So we have to live it out.
Right.
And so being that man of God, that woman of God, and then together that team for God, and our kids need to see that, and they need to experience it in our homes. They need to experience the love of God in our homes.
Amen.
Very much.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yes,
Appreciate
and
it.
if you have any questions you want us to talk about in the future podcast, let us know in the comments or send us an email. Let us know. We'd be more than happy to talk about it.